Hello, everyone, and welcome to another message from Fountain Springs Church. My name is Todd, and I'm a pastor at FSC. I'm so glad that you're joining us, but no, you're not just joining me, but our in-person and online platforms as we all worship God together. Today, we're going to hear another message from one of our pastors, which, spoiler alert, it could be me. And it's been shortened a bit to be broadcasted here on your screen. If you want to listen to the whole message, go to our website at fs.church/messages. Again, we are so glad you're joining us.
So what I'm about to share with you over the next 30 minutes or so is from a book I did recently called Generation Z Unfiltered. You know the millennials are no longer the new kids on the block, right? They're all young professionals. Gen Z would be the kids in middle school, high school, college, and young professionals. And then behind Gen Z are younger children called the Alpha generation. So there's a couple of generation of kids still in K-12, and I just want to help you today. I'm not a guru or a sage. I want to help you understand them better, empathize better, so you can lead them better, connect with them better. Sound like a good goal? 3 of you, good enough for me. Okay. So let me start with a couple of stories. I think these stories are really a good case study to lay the foundation for where we need to go this morning in this session. So 2 stories, 2 kids. The first one is about a young man named Virgil. A few years ago, Virgil was in the 8th grade. He was 13 years old. At about 2 o'clock in the morning one night, he's playing video games with his friend Kashan. This is what 8th graders do. As they're playing this video game, they're not together, but they're in the same complex. You know, they each got their own living room that they're playing in. Both boys at the same moment hear this loud noise outside their window. And both boys scampered to the front window to see what it was. And both boys noticed that there was a storm coming in. But they both assumed it's not that bad. Well, they were wrong. Anybody remember Hurricane Harvey sweeping through the Houston area? Well, they were in Dickinson, Texas, right outside of Houston. Before he knew it, young Virgil, 8th grade, had water up to his knees. His apartment was flooding. But I love how Virgil responded. He didn't wait for a grown-up to do something. Didn't wait for permission from an adult to do something. Virgil grabbed his phone, grabbed his mother and then his older sister, and he ran them upstairs to the 2nd floor of the apartment complex to get away from the rising waters. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that's an act of heroism for an 8th grader. But it didn't stop there. When they get up top to the 2nd floor, Virgil gets a call from Kashan, this friend he's playing video games with. And Kashan says, "Virg, we need help over here. We're drowning. We need help." Well, once again, Virgil springs into action. Doesn't wait for his mother to do something. Doesn't wait for permission from his mother to do something. Virgil runs right back downstairs to his own flooding apartment, grabs an air mattress that he slept on at night, and uses it as a raft. He paddles over to Kashan's apartment and saves his friend and their family as he's paddling back and forth. And that in itself would be an act of heroism, but it didn't stop there. True story. As he's paddling back and forth, you can imagine, he hears the cries for help from other people in the apartment complex. Other families are needing help. Virgil spent hours that night paddling back and forth to help people. According to the police report the next morning, true story, Virgil Smith saved 17 lives that night in Hurricane Harvey. The police and the mayor gave him a big award for being a brave leader, and his mother was praised for raising such a fine, brave young man. Isn't that cool? By the way, don't you love stories like that? Wish there were 1,000 others. That's one story. There's another one, though, that I want to share that might be more familiar to you. The young lady, teenager behind me, is a gal named Haley. Haley's still with us, but it's a bit of a miracle. Haley was growing up in a middle-class home in a kind of a middle-class town. She was sophomore year of high school, beautiful young lady, going to church, posting on Instagram. And if you would looked at her post on Instagram, you would have thought, happiest girl in the world. Until one night, her parents walked into her bedroom and they found her on the floor. Haley had attempted to complete suicide. They had no idea. They rushed her into the ER and they saved her life, thankfully. But again, everyone the next day expressed their shock that they would have never guessed that this well-adjusted, church-going, good grade-making, Instagram-posting girl was struggling with angst, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. I don't know if you know this, but this is quite normalized these days. These are not bad kids in poor parts of town. It's everyday kids that are somehow struggling with mental health. So I share these two stories with you only as a foundation. I think they represent pictures on the spectrum of Generation Z. Virgil on one side, high sense of agency. Haley on the other side, high sense of anxiety. And really, I think they are pictures that give us a little bit of a peek into the world of Gen Z. These two paradoxical, oxymoronic traits are the reality. In fact, if you and I just had a couple of minutes alone together and you said, tell me what I ought to know, and I only got 2 minutes, it'd be this. Generation Z's world is marked by a high sense of agency, meaning I feel very empowered. Think Virgil. I got this. I got a smartphone in my hand. I know what to do. But then at the same time, a high sense of anxiety. Think Haley. So one is screaming to us, I don't need your help. The other is screaming, I desperately need your help. And on any given day, if you're a parent of a teen, you're going to think, I don't know who I got here. Do you need my help? Do you not? Both. And one of the reasons we're wrestling with this issue today in culture, they're not bad kids, they're not wicked kids, they're not evil, they're not dumb, they're smart kids, but they're growing up in a very different day than the one I grew up in. Would anybody agree with that? It's just a funky day. Both of these realities were deepened by the smartphone. I don't think the smartphone is wicked in itself, but I think we were ambushed. We did not know what an overwhelming amount of messaging coming at us all the time would do to our sense of overwhelmedness, our sense of, I got this, fake news, real news, too much news. So this is the backdrop with which I want to start. I'd like to divide my time with you today into 2 parts. In fact, can I just say this? Today's going to feel like a doctor's appointment, okay? We're going to do a diagnosis and a prescription. So stay with me. I'm going to take a few minutes to diagnose what's culture doing today. What are kids turning out to be? What's their world marked by? But then, stay for the end, I'm going to give you some strategies that I think are going to help you better connect with the next gen. Again, whether you're an uncle or aunt, coach, teacher, mom or dad, I'm hoping this becomes very, very practical for you and biblical for you. All right, so who are these new kids on the block? So in the Generation Z book that I mentioned earlier, I put a 2-page centerfold of the generations. It's a chart where I list the 6 generations that will be showing up from day to day in your life. In fact, my guess is probably in this church, all 6 generations exist. Let me stop and say this. Are you all aware that for the first time in modern history, there are 7 distinct sociological generations still alive right now? Because people are living longer, and because mamas are still having babies, we have 7. My Uncle Gene and Aunt Wanda are in their 90s. Uncle Gene is 99 years old. Next month, he turns 100. Still driving a motorhome on I-5 in San Diego. It scares the bejeebies out of me. Get him off the road. He's a piece of history, I'm telling you. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want you just to take a gander at each of these generations and how the elements of the world were shaping them as they grew up, and it might explain why we're a little different, okay? So very quickly, the oldest generation that I want to talk about today would be the builder generation, born 1929 and 1945. You would agree that's the older generation, okay? They were called builders because they built so much out of so little. Look at the years they grew up. After the builders come the baby boomers. They were born between 1946 and 1964. They were called boomers because right after World War II, for the next 18 years, there was a boom of babies. Okay, 76.4 million kids, and that had never happened in America before. And then come the baby busters, or Generation X, basically late 80s all the way through the 70s. Gen X is the title, Xers in the room, that you wanted because your generation said, we don't want to be called anything. Call us the X generation. But the first title you were given by social scientists was baby buster. And do you know why? Because the first year of your generation's existence was the public introduction of the birth control pill. So instead of a boom, it was a bust. Yeah. I mean, birth rates dropped dramatically. In fact, if you add on top of that, look at those years. If you add on top of that Roe v. Wade in 1973, you have a shrinking population, not a booming population. That affected America's tone, economics, enrollment, employment. It was just a shifting pendulum, okay? After the busters, or Gen X, comes Gen Y, or the millennials. These are basically people born in the 80s and 90s, Both of my kids are millennial generation kids. And then after Gen Y comes Gen Z. Basically, these are the kids that have only known and remembered the 21st century. If you talk about the 90s, they go, that's history. You know, Abe Lincoln, JFK, and the 90s, you know. I mean, that's kind of how it is. And then the youngest children we're just now beginning to measure and collect data on would be the Alpha generation. So after Gen Y, Gen Z comes Gen Alpha, because we're back at the beginning of the alphabet again. But they're basically the kids who've grown up over the last 6-7 years, and they're still taking shape, okay? Now, I'm moving quick, but I'm doing it on purpose. All I want to do is give you a great sense of understanding and empathy as you connect with different generations. My goal today is not to stereotype, but to understand. Can I say that again? My goal today is not to stereotype, but to understand. And maybe as you lead a teenager where you're getting frustrated because you just don't understand this teenager. By the way, you do know people said that about you when you were a teen. You do know that, don't you? Back since Socrates, we've been saying, kids today, you know? Socrates even said that thousands of years ago. So let's walk through and let's talk a little bit about the life paradigm or the narrative each generation brings with them as they move from childhood to adulthood. Or as I like to say, from backpack to briefcase. What's the narrative they bring with them? So go back in time, almost 100 years, the builder generation. As I interviewed builder generation folks in retirement villages, we had a blast, but here's what I came away with. Their life paradigm, when they started their career, just be grateful you got a job. Somebody talk to me. Why would I assign that one to this generation? Yeah, the Great Depression. My dad's a perfect example. My dad was born in 1930. So the first decade of his life was the Great Depression. The next 5 years, World War II. He just passed away in 2020 at 90 years old. I can't tell how many times he said, be grateful you have a job. I said, Dad, I started the company. Well, just be grateful you have that job. Yes, sir, okay? By the way, you remember this generation? Frugal, conservative, save the wrapping paper at Christmas, we'll use it next year. Remember this? Okay? All right. Baby boomers, you're now kind of retiring at $10,000 a day on average, but I gave us boomers, I'm one of them, the life paradigm, I want better. Because it was a time of expansion, not depression. It was post-World War II. We just won a big war. Shopping malls were popping up. McDonald's was franchising. We felt large and in charge. Xers come along. After baby boomers come baby busters. Actually, you're going to love this in the room. I gave the Xers, after talking to them, I laughed hard because we just identified so much. But I gave you the life paradigm. Keep it real. Keep it real. Don't tell me life is wonderful. Keep it real. This was the first generation that was demanding authenticity. You seem like everything was plastic before you. So look at the years you grew up. By the late 60s, mishandling of so many things was going on. LBJ said everything's fine over there in Vietnam, but we were watching the news and we were seeing footage that said it's not fine over there. Then you had the Watergate scandal. Now you had a Democrat and a Republican both lying from the White House. Then you had the OPEC gas crisis. Does anybody remember standing in line to get gas? It was just a weird time. So Xers, you were growing up then, but you were being led by a generation that was a little more skeptical at this point. You grew up a little more skeptical yourself, a little more jaded as a generation. Millennials come along. Millennials, please forgive us. We've been throwing you under the bus for 15 years. I ask your forgiveness. But millennials, I gave you the life paradigm. I've loved talking to the millennials. But here's the life paradigm I think you carried with you as you entered your career. Life is a cafeteria. Now, let me explain. My two kids are perfect examples. So just like you go to a cafeteria and you grab a tray and a plate and you go down the line and you make up your meal, right? Tailored for your taste buds. A little bit of roast beef, a little bit of mashed potatoes. Love that Jell-O. Give me some pudding, and you make up your meal. These young professionals are making almost every major decision of their life as if it were a buffet. Has nothing to do with rich or poor. In fact, millennials grew up in a time of digital customization. As they grew up, the computer grew up. As they grew up, the cell phone grew up. So here's some examples. My two kids, they're both in their 30s now. Perfect examples. Years ago, my two kids stopped buying compact discs to get their music. Why would they buy a CD? There might be 6 songs I don't even like on that CD. I get one song at a time from my own playlist on Apple Music, Spotify. It's a buffet. They'll make educational decisions this way. They'll graduate high school and go to 2 or 3 different colleges for 1 degree. One of them's overseas. And you know this now, don't you, today? You can just make up a major. Just make it up, you know? We just want your money. Just make it up and come on, you know? Isn't it true? And you're paying out of the nose for this. By the way, they'll make spiritual decisions this way. A little bit of Jesus, a little bit of Buddha, a little bit of Eastern mysticism, a little bit of Oprah, shake it together. I got my faith, you know? There's no one true source, but this God really likes me. So all I'm saying is, it's almost like a free agent mindset. Employers in the room, you know this, don't you? You're interviewing people, and they're quite audacious in what they're asking for. Now, it's a new day. It's a new day and a new buffet. Now, see what I did there? Okay. Okay, for Gen Z, I got to tell you, I love this generation of kids. I spoke to middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students, and young professionals. And every one of the conversations in these focus groups they were so respectful. They really were, but they were candid. And the phrase I took away after talking to loads of them was this: I'm coping and hoping. Now let me explain. They're still hopeful in many ways because they're young, and you're kind of hopeful when you're young. I'm going to major in this and do this. But many of them just feel like they're coping with life right now. Mental health issues are a thing. And when I say coping, I don't mean coping skills. We all need coping skills. Life's hard, right? It was coping mechanisms. Like a teenage guy might go, I just have to binge on video games for 6 hours a day. It's the only way I can make it through the day. So this is just coping with uncertainty, with a crazy world, with, pardon me, they feel like a group of leaders in D.C. that don't know what the heck they're doing. It feels that way, doesn't it, sometimes? I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I put myself in the 16-year-old shoes and I go, yeah, I mean, it feels like the average age there is 80. I'm not being unkind, but do you not agree? It's like, when are you going to step aside and let a 50-year-old come in? So their view is just informed by this. I'm coping and hoping. Now, of course, we don't know Alpha Gen narrative yet, although some of you are raising 2-year-olds, you go, I can tell you what it is right now already. Okay. Let's do one more real fast. I know I'm taking too much time on this, but it's so much fun to kind of compare and contrast. Anybody want to talk about this category? Attitude toward authority. Anybody think that might have changed in 100 years? Okay. So let's go. So as I talked to representatives from each one, for the builder generation, it was respect them, right? I was taught that by my mom and dad. For the boomers, it was replace them. We just thought we would take over. Thank you very much. And we will not leave Washington, D.C. No, no. Okay? For Xers, it's endure them. We got to put up with these knuckleheads. Let's go get a Starbucks. For the millennials, it's choose them because remember, life's the cafeteria. So here's an example of this. 15 years ago, 2008, I was on the campus of University of Georgia talking to undergrads. And we were talking about this topic of mentoring with these college students. And it was very common for me to hear them say to me, well, yes, he's my professor, but he's not my mentor. And what they meant by that is, I have to take this class, but I'm choosing the people that I'm let pour into me. See that sense of agency? I'm in control. Life's a buffet. For Gen Z, again, very respectful, but very candid, because this generation of kids didn't grow up with just a cell phone. They grew up with a smartphone, which I believe was a game changer. You know the feeling I got from them? Not sure I need them. Now, you and I both know they do need you, but there's a sense, well, let me give you an illustration. I just, not very long ago, talked to a high school senior who said, my teachers are obsolete. And he wasn't being cruel. He was being factual. I can look up everything they say in the classroom. Tell me something I can't look up. So teachers, your role is changing. They don't need you for information. They need you for interpretation. It's a new day. Now, for Gen Alpha, I talked to some children, which was really fun, but mostly I talked to parents, I talked to elementary school teachers, and do you know what I feel like is coming as they grow older? Question everything. They've had a tablet since they were 4 years old, so watch out, fasten your seatbelts, hang on, okay? Now, all I wanted you to see was, can you see how we were shaped a little bit differently in different times? People develop like wet cement. You know how you can press your hand into wet cement on a sidewalk day one and leave it there? But you try to do that year one, you can't press your hand in that sidewalk. In fact, it takes a jackhammer to change it, right? Our neural pathways are very plastic in the first 20, 25 years of our life. The plasticity is high, the flexibility, the adaptability. It's when you're learning a bunch. Later, the neural pathways are not as plastic. And just like it takes a jackhammer to change the sidewalk after a year or two, for some of you to change your mind, it might take a jackhammer to change your mind. Anybody feel like you've made up your mind on a couple things and, yeah, I'm not going to change it, you know? Okay, so looking at this chart, I just have one simple question for you. Here it is. Do you feel the disconnect between the generations? Do you feel that disconnect? So let me give you just a word of encouragement. If you and I were to hop on a jet and we were to fly across the world to another country, let's say China, okay? As we got off that jet at the airport in Beijing, wouldn't you naturally be psyched up to work harder to connect with people there? Because you would know, oh my gosh, we're different, right? They speak a different language here. They have different customs here. They probably have different values here. Bingo. When I, in my age, talk to a Gen Zer at 15, 16 years old, I know I got to work harder to connect with them. Different language. Remember the game we just played? Different values, different customs. So all I'm saying is, what do we do in a foreign land? We work harder to connect with people. Are you willing to put in the work? Or are you building walls instead of bridges? Is there a way, this is a question, I mean it, is there a way to turn our frustration with the younger generations into fascination? You know, they have a lot to teach us. You know that, don't you? They know stuff about apps that we could monetize at the company or we could find useful, and oh my gosh, all I'm saying is, could we turn our frustration into fascination? If we're going to do what we just sung about before I hopped up, to every generation, sons and daughters, we got to work to connect with them. The leader needs to lean in to connect with the follower, not the other way around. Okay, enough said. So I want to look at a passage of Scripture real quick. Actually, two of them very fast. But I want you to listen closely. This next passage I'm going to share with you has become my favorite passage in the Old Testament. It's going to be strange because it's not a Psalm or Genesis. It's 1 Chronicles. I know, I'm weird. But you know, in the book of 1 Chronicles, the writer is chronicling the tribes and clans of Israel. And he's talking in chapter 12 about the contribution that each tribe in Israel made to the nation. They were all different. Look what he says about the tribe of Issachar. Look at this. He says in 1 Chronicles 12:32, and the sons of Issachar were men who, what are those next three words? Say them out loud. Understood the times. In other words, when we look around us in our culture today, and we don't know what's going on, we can't make heads or tails of it. These people seem to understand the times. They seem to get what's going on. And I love the fact that he didn't stop there. He goes on to say, with the knowledge of what the people of Israel should do. I literally prayed this prior to this service. God, help us understand the times. Help us be wise moms and dads. Not old idiots that don't want to tell kids line up or whatever. People that understand the times and have the insight to know how to lead them, to connect with them. That's my goal. So let me take a couple of minutes, in case this has felt like Debbie Downer. Let me give you the upside of Gen Z. There's a lot of upsides. In fact, there's a lot of places where the 59 million Gen Z members remind me a lot of Jesus. I'm going to repeat that. There's a lot of ways Gen Z reminds me of Jesus. Check this out. Did you know that the focus of this particular generation, with some exceptions, is social justice for the marginalized? If you're anywhere on social media, you understand this. Gen Z has a real passion and heartbeat for anybody that feels marginalized, whether that's a race thing or whether that's climate change or whatever. There's a truckload of issues, and they tend to lean that way. There's exceptions, but of the 59 million, that's their heartbeat. Can I ask you a question? When you read the Gospels, don't you see Jesus having a heart for the marginalized? He's seeking out tax collectors and prostitutes and spending time with them. They were on the outskirts, the fringes. He didn't just talk to rich white folk. You know that, don't you? Come on. Okay, number two, they show high levels of compassion. So when you look at the data set for Gen Z and the Alpha generation for that matter, They're up and down with empathy, but there's a growing pattern worldwide toward compassion. And my theory on that is, I think because they're exposed to so many problems all around the world very rapidly, they start feeling compassionate about these problems that need to be solved and these people that need to be served. I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school, I think my biggest problem was, where's my baseball mitt and how do I find a girlfriend? You know, that was it, baby. That's as hard as it got. Today, a middle schooler on social media, they know about Hamas and Israel and the war that's going on. They know about the Ukraine thing that doesn't seem to end. They know about the mass shooting in Maine. They know at 13, they're very aware. So when do they feel overwhelmed by their teenage years? The third item I want you to get is this. They have a high interest in entrepreneurship. Did you know this? Nationwide in the U.S., 72% of high school students want to be an entrepreneur. Meaning, I'd rather start something than join something. So I want them to join some stuff, but if they join, you probably need to create a sense of entrepreneurship. Is there anything that they could help pioneer at the organization or in the family? That's the sense they have. And no doubt, they've watched Shark Tank. Okay, one more. This is really cool to me because of my interest. Gen Z has a keener interest in leadership globally than the previous 3 generations at their age. Isn't that cool? So one more passage. You know that throughout the Old Testament, and particularly in the Psalms, God doesn't just request we care about the next generation, He's commanding it. In Psalm 78, verse 6, look what he said. So the next generation would know, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. This is what God's obsessed with. Loving you, saving you, but then making sure that you get His heartbeat for what's behind you. Are you hearing what I'm saying? I think I'm preaching the choir. I think you get this. But one of the things that Pastor Chris wanted to establish today is let's get consumed, not only with our own well-being and paying the bills, but we're looking backward at those kiddos and saying, how are we creating an environment for them to naturally find a relationship with Jesus, to naturally see the truth, and to want to serve as well? Not just they graduated. Thank God they graduated. Okay, enough said. So how do we lead them? Let me do one more slide, and I'm going to sit down. Let's go back to our imaginary Starbucks. Let's say you and I went to Starbucks, and you said, Tim, I just have a few minutes. What would you suggest I do to try to connect with this next generation? Okay? These would be the shifts that I would recommend that we make. These are shifts that I have tried to make over the last 5 to 7 years. All right? Number one, they're all simple. Number one, don't think control, think connect. Don't think control, think connect. Are you like me in your home? If the kids are going crazy and things seem to be out of control and they've gone awry, I just want to seize control. Just get out of the way. I'm going to take over here. You know, I'm a father, you know, that sort of thing. Can I tell you something? Control is a myth. Y'all see it's a myth, isn't it? Okay. Nobody is in control. He's in control. None of us are in control. So instead of seeking something that I really will never have, here's what I found out was better. To seek connection. So I can't control that teenager's attitude, but I can connect with them at the heart level, meaning an arm around the shoulder where I'm saying, tell me what's going on. I know you're hurting right now, or I know something's not going right. Talk to me. And even though I don't ever gain control, I gain a deep sense of influence. Don't think control, think connect. Number two, don't think inform, think interpret. Remember I said earlier today, they don't need you for information, they need you for interpretation. Let me help you make sense of all that you know. Let me give context to the content you've consumed on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. So they need us to help shape their worldview. We don't need to tell them what to think, we need to tell them how to think. Can I get an amen from the choir on that one? We need to teach them how to think. Here's another one, number 3. Don't think rules, think equations. So by the time our kids were like 7 and 11, we kind of did away with a bunch of rules.
We're so glad you tuned in today. Fountain Springs Church is located in the Black Hills of South Dakota, but our community reaches beyond our neighborhoods and spreads around the whole world. Our website is a great way to give, get involved, and get connected. If you appreciate our ministry and want to be part of our mission to show people who Jesus is, here's what I recommend. Join us financially. When you do that, you're giving other people the opportunity to hear what you just heard. So here's a way to do that. Visit our website at fs.church/give And thank you so much for being with us today. And let's do our best this week to show people who Jesus is.